This is the part 3 video on our subject of New Age slavery. We'll be continuing from where we left off. So, Rebecca, restating the last question I asked you in part 2, what can people do, people who have limited means and resources, stop the perpetrators of these crimes when they are indirect and technologically based?
Yes, that's a good question, and I think it's very important to answer it. I would say that people who are of limited means would need to put themselves in a position where they can save their money to take the necessary health tests and diagnosis that they need to prove that they are a victim of psychiatric reprisal, New Age slavery, that someone is abusing neuroscience technology to artificialize their behavior or the behavior of a loved one. Additionally, it would be very important for people to take tests like the MRI, which shows the actual body tissues, and in the James Walber case, James Walber was a person who was able to prove in court that he was implanted with microchips and that someone was using that to torture his body electronically using electromagnetic radiation. However, the main point is that he had the paperwork and the expert witnesses, and we know that that can be expensive. However, if people put themselves in a position, even with limited means, to take that test or try to get a health insurance that covers at least a portion of the MRI, I believe there are a couple of companies out there who do your research. Additionally, it's very important for people to engage in the political process, because even if you win that case the way James Walber did, it does not necessarily keep that from happening to a person again, because there's not enough legal protection. When there's a new technology that comes out, we allow it to run first and regulate it later. You cannot protect people as you go on a case-by-case basis. We have enough knowledge to foresee a lot of problems in the future before they occur. So what people need to do is actually submit complaints to the appropriate legal authorities, whether it's the Federal Communications Commission, because those are radio wave devices, or the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's very important for people to keep their problems on a record and not to leave it off the record, because if it's off the record, if it's hidden from view, if it doesn't have a physical form, then it's very difficult to have it addressed, and it's very easy for those who are perpetuating this underground issue to keep it underground. And that's not what we want. We want open dialogue. We want a bill that will protect people. We want people to have the means to monitor and protect themselves from these new and emerging technologies. And we'll be composing a bill to be passed at the federal level. And we need people to come to our website, lobbygroupllc.com. Contact us and share your story. We need people to share their story and let us know what they're experiencing, and ask us questions about what they can do to help themselves and to drive this issue forward, because it's very important to get this matter addressed before it gets out of hand, before people are in a position where they can't get it addressed. We need to catch this in its early stages before it advances into a much later stage that we may not be equipped or capable of addressing or dealing with. So we need those testimonies, because generally in a bill, if it gets introduced by a member of the House or the Senate, there's a public hearing, and people can come and give their 2-minute input about the matter, whether it's their personal experience or it's an expert witness, etc. We need those voices to galvanize the issue, bring it forward with one voice. If it's a couple of people people or only a handful of people, it's not going to make a dent. You need thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to support this issue if you want it to get addressed. And we need to have a very logical plan, having in mind, the politics associated with this matter. Yeah.
I see. My next question I'd like to know is, I have observed an increase in interracial marriages in Ohio and other parts of the nation, and an increased growth of mixed-race children. Is this helpful or harmful to the black race politically?
Well, I know that some people state that interracial relations, married or not, is beneficial for this country in ending racism. However, that is not necessarily the case. We have higher rates of interracial relations, and we also have increased racial tensions. And while it may not necessarily be proven that there's a direct correlation between the two, it is happening around the same time. And that's something to note as social scientists. Additionally, when it comes to the interest of the black community in the United States, it is not in their interest to engage in interracial relations and give birth to biracial offspring, because those biracial offspring are going to be economically motivated to align themselves with the political majority side of their family line. And so they will want to marry someone who is part of the political majority so that they can continue those privileges and continue that line instead of the black lineage because of the economic motive. Marriage and interracial relations is a very political issue because the white race benefits from the rich genetic heritage of the black American, woman or man, because we have the highest genetic diversity in the world as a black race. And their partner has the temporary benefit of being a member of that family and experiencing privileges, but their children are more likely and have more incentive to marry into the white race and continue the legacy and further strengthen the white race. If we look at racial groups in the United States as like corporations, like stock, we can understand this behavior a lot better in terms of interests and asset allocation. You have the African American corporation, the white American corporation, the Asian American corporation. And when we hear statistics about how prosperous or how not so prosperous we are, it's like a ticker symbol on the stock exchange that lets us know if our stocks are down or if our stocks are going up. When we see that black Americans have the least amount of assets in the United States, and that makes our stocks go down. When we have a case like Trayvon Martin and the treatment of blacks in prison institutions and prison slave labor, comprising most of the slaves in the prison industrial complex, that also drives our stocks down. Whenever we see these cases of blacks being abused, it further stunts the reputation of the African American, and it reinforces their underclass ascribed status. And so, who wants to invest in a failing company, right? And a company whose liabilities exceed its assets, whose expenses exceed its revenues? If you saw financial statements like this, you would not buy that company.
Right.
And, when people marry into a family, when people marry a person, they're marrying into that race. They're investing in that race. And they are continuing that race's legacy. The reason why you see white Americans engaging in those relations with black Americans is because they have enough assets, they have enough revenue and because they know that they have a future benefit in terms of reproductive capability. Because the black gene in blacks in general are known for their reproductive prowess. Because they're the original man, they have all the genes, so they can adapt the environmental conditions and pass down their adaptive traits to their offspring. This is natural selection. We're a product of natural selection. Other groups are a product of more artificial selection. And so when you have that biological asset being used for a long-term gain, you can take on a short-term risk. So that explains their end of it. So interracial marriage isn't in the interest of the Black Americans or the blacks in general, because that biracial child is going to continue enforce the interest of what will maximize their interests. Because remember, politics, a political actor is one who takes courses of actions that maximize their interest. And people in general, their interest is privileges. They want a house, they want a car, and they want a vacation once a year at least, a good paying job, and an education. And they want the same set of privileges for their children. When you look at Black American communities in the United States, the average one of them, they're on the decline. Their schools are poor. There's crime infested. Statistics state that if people live in such an area, their future is bleak. Who wants to invest in the Black community? Who wants to invest in the Black race? Who wants to make an alliance with, a people or a country? Because a family is like a little nation. It's like a micro-sized nation. So what nation wants to invest or ally with another nation that's going to drag them down with them? People make these calculations in their head. Marriage is very political. Very, very political. Because it determines how many resources you're going to have, how your life is going to go, how your children's life is going to go. It can determine and change a person's entire life, their entire future. It's a very big decision. Spouses, people who are engaged, they even check each other's credit score before deciding to marry one another, because they don't want to take on that debt. And think about the political debt that African Americans have as a people. All that disrespect, all that less amount of power that they have to determine their destiny, to be subject to so many ills and harms from various nations. And when one group sees another group harming the African American race, or the Black race, it gives other groups the idea that they can do the same thing and get away with it. So then you kind of have an exponential oppression coming from multiple sides. It's multilinear now. Other groups that are emerging powers are getting involved in Black affairs and benefiting it the way they see the Europeans or the Caucasians, right? So it's not in the Black American interest to decrease their population. Because, why do I say decrease population? Because that biracial child is more likely to marry a member of the political majority. And in the United States, as a democratic nation, what? The majority rules. So if you want to rule, then you must align yourself with the majority. People think. That child will think. They will find other reasons. They will say, no, it's not this, I love that person. But they will benefit from that alliance. Think of, those kind of relationships as alliances, and then you'll be able to understand. Or as corporations, that you invest your money, that you invest your future in, then you will understand, because they're expecting a return on their investment. They're expecting a gain, a capital gain. Additionally, Black Americans, they need to realize that, to continue someone else's legacy is not in their interest. to create more members of society that will have the economic incentive of exploiting them is not in their interest. That's politics.
Right. Going along with what you're saying, at this time, what actions can Black people take that maximize their interests?
That's a good question. First, they must have the right mindset. They must recognize that they are not even a player on the political scene. They are like unto a tennis ball in a tennis match that's being tossed and forth, back and forth across the white net by two players. The players in the tennis game is like the other groups. The African Americans or the Black diaspora, the Black race in general, they're like the tennis ball. And you've seen in tennis matches that some people, they put the tennis ball in their pocket, they put it up their skirt, and then at the end of the game they whack it away because it's disposable. It's an object. It's a thing. It's not a person. It's a non-person. And so Blacks need to realize that they must be a player by taking courses of actions that maximize their interests. They must know that it's not in their interest to decrease their own population by melting into other groups. That's already happened before in history, which is why we have so many different groups. Why we have something called Polynesia. Poly means many. Did you know there's a place called Melanesia, like melanin? Melanesia are the ones who did not mix. Polynesia are the ones who mixed. And so every time a group mixes with a Black group, they call them something else. And that group wants to keep being something else so they won't get the backlash, so they won't inherit the Black credit score and be rejected alone of privileges. So Blacks must first recognize that they have interests that must be addressed, and that they need control over their destiny and not to be subject to the whims of others, and that they must increase their population and also be able to protect their population. We don't want an increase in slaves. We want an increase in people who will grow and be prosperous and successful.
Right. So, thank you. You answered all of my questions.